Today, we're diving into the hidden logic of international power struggles. We're going to use a really fascinating framework to map out the 10 levels of regime change.
You know, it's a question we all wonder about. International relations can just feel so chaotic, right? One day it's a diplomatic spat, the next it's sanctions, and then, seemingly out of nowhere, there's a war. But what if it's not random? What if there's actually a predictable pattern to all of this?
Well, it turns out there might be. Beneath all that chaos, there's something our source material calls a living map of strategic reasoning. The idea is that the path from a simple disagreement to an all-out war, it's not just a series of accidents. It follows a pretty calculated, escalating logic.
And that map has a name, the Rajeev Scale. This is the lens we're going to be looking through today. Think of it as a framework that breaks down the 10 distinct levels of pressure nations can put on each other, starting with something as simple as influence and ending in, well, total war.
So here's how we're going to tackle this. First, we'll look at the big picture, this map for power. Then we'll break it down into its 3 key zones: influence, coercion, and intervention. And finally, we'll talk about why this scale is so important for making sense of the world right now.
All right, so let's dive into the first section, the influence zone. This covers levels 1 through 3. This is really the starting point, where all the pressure is subtle, it's strategic, much more like a high-stakes chess match than an actual fight. And you can see in this zone, the focus is all about stability, negotiation, and using incentives. The goal here isn't to overthrow anybody. It's about guiding and shaping a country's behavior using soft power and strategic partnerships.
So at level 1, you have countries that are just so deeply connected, through alliances, through their economies, that trying to force a regime change would be completely self-defeating. I mean, think about Poland inside of NATO. Sure, there can be friction, but the idea of an intervention, it's unthinkable. The stability of the whole system is too valuable to everyone involved.
Now, at level 2, we start to see some real disagreements, sometimes even serious ones. But the relationship itself is just too important to risk. Take the US and Japan negotiating defense issues. The pressure is handled through talks and diplomacy, not threats, because those long-term strategic benefits, they outweigh everything else.
Okay, level 3. This is where things get a bit more transactional. A nation is doing something its partners really don't like, and so the response becomes a mix of carrots and sticks, right? Incentives to get them to change their mind, and penalties if they don't. The US response to India buying Russian missiles is a perfect example. They apply some sanctions, sure, but they also offer alternatives. The goal is to influence, not topple.
But now, we're crossing a really critical line into the coercion zone. This is where the gloves start coming off. The chess game is pretty much over, and the goal shifts from just influencing a country to actively forcing it to do something.
And you can see how the goals get more and more intense here. We go from simply trying to contain a country to forcing a major policy reversal, then to actively trying to make the regime itself collapse, and finally, using covert action to see just how much it can take.
Level 4 kicks in when a state starts to actively align itself with a rival power. The response: containment. Think about Serbia trying to balance its relationship with both Russia and the EU. The whole point of sanctions and diplomatic pressure is to make that alignment with Russia so painful that Serbia has to rethink its choices.
At level 5, the pressure is just dialed all the way up. We're talking maximum non-military coercion. It's not just about making things costly anymore. It's about trying to create a full-blown crisis. You use intense economic sanctions, diplomatic isolation, anything to try and force a huge policy change, or maybe even cause the government to crack from the inside.
And that brings us to level 6, and this is a really fundamental shift in what the outside power wants. At this point, the goal is no longer to change a regime's mind, it's to bring that regime down.
This is what we call active destabilization. And the key signal, the thing to watch for, is when an outside power officially recognizes an opposition leader, effectively creating a rival government. You combine that with financial blockades, seizing assets, anything to choke the regime out. The situation in Venezuela, with the international recognition of Juan Guaido, is a textbook case of level 6 in action.
So that leads us right into level 7, covert action. This is really the last stop before open war. We're talking about things that are deniable, arming proxy groups, cyber attacks. It's all about testing a regime's breaking point from the shadows, like the Timber Sycamore program in Syria. But once you cross from level 7 into level 8, that deniability, it's gone.
We are now entering the final and by far the most dangerous phase, the intervention zone.
This is basically the point of no return, where direct military force finally gets put on the table.
Level 8 is all about limited military action. So this isn't a full-scale invasion, not yet. It's about using specific tools like airstrikes or imposing a no-fly zone to weaken the regime's military and tip the balance of power on the ground. This is often done under a humanitarian pretext, just like we saw with the NATO campaign in Libya back in 2011.
But what happens when that limited action just isn't enough? Well, it forces a massive, monumental decision. And that brings us to level 9, a full-scale invasion. This is the ultimate gamble. And it really only happens when 3 specific conditions are met. 1, the intervening power has to believe the regime is actually removable. 2, they believe there's a credible opposition ready to take its place. And 3, they think a quick, decisive military victory is actually possible. The 2003 invasion of Iraq was launched based on exactly those calculations.
But as we all know, sometimes those calculations are just catastrophically wrong. And that's what leads to the final tragic endpoint of this scale, level 10.
At level 10, the invasion might have succeeded, but the state itself completely collapses. Suddenly, the occupying power is responsible for, well, everything. As the source material puts it so powerfully, intervention becomes state building under fire. The costs just explode, an insurgency begins, and the country becomes a sovereign void. And that's exactly what we saw happen in Iraq after 2003.
So you can see this clear journey up the ladder. It starts with subtle influence, it hardens into direct coercion, it escalates into active destabilization, and then it hits its climax with military intervention. And every single step up that ladder is a calculated choice, a weighing of the risks and the potential rewards.
And that leaves us with one final really crucial question. When you look at the global hotspots today, and you use this framework as your guide, where do you think they fall on this scale? And maybe more importantly, which way are they moving?